Welcome back to another episode of Honesty Talk, where we will be speaking about life, living, and worship, and closing the gap between the two. And I'm going to head straight over to my girl, LaYinka. What comes to mind?
The thing that comes to mind is how lives, we're in this dunya, and how sometimes we feel that there has to be a separation between living our day to day and then pausing for worship, pausing for ibadat. And the thing that comes to mind for me is how can we integrate more of ibadat and worship into our day-to-day life, so it doesn't feel as if we're compartmentalizing the two, like we have to pause one to do the other, and that, especially because we have to pause life to worship, it can feel so much that we have to rush back to life because of those pauses for worship. And instead of feeling like, okay, I have to pause life to worship, how about if what would it be like if our lives were worship? Because that's what we were created for. And what would it be like to close the gap between living our day-to-day lives and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? That's what comes to mind for me.
I'm going to head straight over to Sumayah.
Integrating the two. I think the question that comes up a lot is, I want to be able to include more, but I've just got so much on my plate. Time is tight as it is. I wish I could do more, but I just don't see where I'm going to be able to fit that in. I think also part of it is that we have a really specific image of what we think like worshiping Allah has to look like. My dua has to be, with the candles and I'm on the mat and it's perfectly quiet. It has to be under like these really specific conditions. And if I'm not meeting that, then I'm failing and it doesn't count. I think getting tied up in all of that makes you kind of dismiss what you may already be doing it, but it doesn't count to you because you think it has to fit in this particular kind of mold. But yeah, I think if we open it up and you look at all the ways that you're already interacting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're already speaking to him, you're already doing all these things, and you just don't count it. You just don't count it as worship.
I think it goes back down to the definition of worship, right? Because we tend to look at worship as private devotion. I think a lot of people do. When you think about worship, you think me, Allah, and quiet surroundings, formal, focused, concentration, and it's just me and my Lord. And so I think the definition maybe is causing us some problems, because worship is you on your prayer mat, and it's just you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And worship is also you on a protest, right? Being a voice for our brothers and sisters in Gaza and Sudan. Worship is a family gathering where food comes together, yeah, and you're chatting and you're laughing, but it's like, Ya Rabbi, thank you for my family, thank you for my food. So I think it goes back down to our definition. There is like this kind of private affair, but there's also a very public affair, and I think maybe that's kind of causing us problems. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it definitely does come down to the definition of worship, and as I was speaking earlier, I said that and that because it does feel that I think we do think that worship is that formalized, ritualized, devoted time between us and Allah only, where the power of niyyah, is that's the life hack, right? إنما الأعمال بالنيات. Action is by intention. So the hack is, how can we do more worship in our daily lives simply by utilizing that intention. So that time that you're mopping the floor, the time that you're cooking the dinner, the time that you're writing that email, the time that you're calling that friend, the time that you're visiting that person, like every single thing. But you know what, I think the challenge also is that presence for that intentionality. Because life is always so busy, we're zipping from one thing to another. We don't pause to actually check in with the intention to make it worship. And that's the challenge. So we say we don't have time, but we do have time. We do have time to just take a moment and calibrate that action so that we're thinking, okay, this is for Allah. I'm going to give that pound, that dollar, that cent, whatever it is to that poor person, and this is for Allah. It's just rote. It's without thinking. We're doing things on autopilot. And I think because so much of our lives are on autopilot and we're not checking in with intentionality, that's where we're not getting to have the opportunity to close that gap between worship and life.
I think there's something, I think before that even, because as I was listening to you, it's like essentially what you're saying is that we need to come to a point of remembering to correct our intention for like everyday, moments, right? But I think there's something before that, because the ability to remember to check your intention and correct it is only going to happen when you are in a normal state of remembering Allah, right? So like your default is that you are deep in the remembrance of Allah. So then it's not a case of, oh my gosh, let me change my intention, because you're already constantly in the dhikr, the remembrance of Allah. It becomes automatic that you then shift your intention. And that's like, it's an ideal, right? But it's not impossible, because there are many people in the world who that's their default. They wake up and they are thinking about Allah. They go to sleep and they are thinking about Allah. And I think it might sound like really basic, but I think dhikr is underestimated. The power of like filling time with the movement of the tongue, mentioning the remembrances of Allah and moving your heart in sync with that. And then when that becomes your default, you're going to remember Allah more. And what does Allah tell us? Remember me, I will remember you. And when Allah remembers us, He gives us the tawfiq and the ability to check our intention automatically, unconsciously.
But it comes from that conscious effort first, though.
I think does it come from the conscious effort?
There's that conscious effort. You know how, like, when we think of how we learn through something being first conscious and then it being unconscious, right? So that conscious, okay, now let me do my adhkar. Now let me, I'm washing the dishes. Let me use this time to do my subhanallah wa bihamdi. It comes with that consciousness first.
The dhikr.
Yeah, before it even becomes a conscious way of being that one is, unconscious way of being that one is filling time and space with the remembrance of Allah. So it feels like the chicken and the egg situation, which one comes first? But I feel like we do have this space of, okay, we need to remember Allah. We need to bring ourselves again back to that awareness that my tongue is doing nothing. Mm-hmm. Let me actually do my subhanallah, alhamdulillah, astaghfirullah, whatever it is that we're saying.
But
do you see what I mean?
Before that, and I know I keep going back, before that, you're gonna have to want it, right? Mm. You're gonna have to see the value of bringing intention into the everyday. And unless we recognize the value, we won't want it, and then we won't choose it. So I wonder if the problem actually that maybe needs to be solved is just the value that we attach to time and utilizing as many moments as possible in the way of Allah. Because if that becomes so important to us, then you're going to be like, oh my gosh, right, let me use this time. What are your thoughts, Sumayah?
I listening to both of you, I was thinking about, so like the kind of, is it life? Am I fitting my dhikr around my life, or am I fitting my life around my dhikr? Like, which one is the core and everything else has to move? I thought of how, again, I'm going to take it back to being sick. It was such a, like a, it was a time where I realized a lot of things and saw things so differently. When you're busy and running around and doing all the things and moving from one thing to another, just like you said, you're preoccupied, and this is just kind of like an obligation that I have to fit into the schedule within the time. When you're kind of like stuck, if you feel like you're going to die, if you feel like you're really unwell, now the priority shifts, so all the other stuff becomes like useless, like worthless. You throw it out, and now, like, I want to connect with Allah, I'm begging Allah to make me better. It shifts, it turns everything upside down. And then I think being in that for a long period of time, now it's just different. The other responsibilities come back, the other things come back, the noise, the hustle comes back, but this is now the center. It's just different now. And so I think once it becomes like, just like you said, this is what we were created for. It just becomes so clear. Like, Allah told us this is what He created us for, but it's kind of like, yeah, we know, but now you know this is what you're supposed to be doing, and everything else is like, when I'm in my grave, will I think about this other stuff? Will it weigh this much? What will be the thing that I'm supposed to really give time to? And like you said about tawfiq, like when in the hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, when we approach Him walking, He comes to us running. We do our part first. And then the tawfiq and the grace is that Allah allows you to increase. So once you start with the one thing. Some people be like, I don't even like fit in my 5 daily prayers. I can't yet. So do your istighfar. Like, just start with something small, and then the istighfar opens the doors, and this person starts to pray, and then the istighfar opens up qiyam al-layl, and then that opens up like Quran, and then that unlocks, like, they just keep up leveling and upgrading. And this practice of being in dhikr, like you're breathing, it really does. It opens up opportunities, it opens up doors, it changes your connection to Allah. You are truly in constant, like, the line is on, you're on speakerphone, like, all the time. And so your dua as well, you're talking to Allah all the time. It's not this thing where, let me stop what I'm doing and turn on and make the phone call, You're online, you're live,
Yeah, right. And it's, when you mentioned the hadith that, if you take a step towards Allah, He comes to you at speed. But before you take the step, you need to make the intention to take the step. You need to know that I need to go to Allah. I need to go to Him. I can't exist anymore as myself. I need Him. I'm in need of Him. And that desire, that yearning, allows you to take that step. And then He comes to you, subhanAllah, in ways that you can't imagine. But it's that yearning. And so I guess what my next question is how can we truly realize the importance and the magnitude of utilizing everyday moments, or turning everyday moments into worship? How can we bring ourselves to that level of yearning?
As you were speaking, one of the questions that came to mind for me was, is it possible for us to get that yearning without being tested?
Do you know what? As she was talking, I was thinking, because, you mentioned, being sick, and that was like an awakening. But do we, like,
see the humans, yeah?
The mandem.
We've got issues. Yeah. But Allah knows us. Subhanallah. And when we're being tested, when something is hard and challenging, it's hard to see, of course, it's hard to see the wisdom and the hikmah, and more so the love in which Allah is serving that to us. Because Allah serves, and I hold firmly to this, that when Allah tests us, He's serving us that test with love. But this love for us to draw closer to Him, right? But does that yearning for Him, for our, like, that closeness to Him, that desire for Him to be in our corner, to take care of us, hold us, carry us, does that come when we're in ease? In my experience, I don't think so. I don't think my yearning for Allah has come from a place of ease. And sometimes I just think, subhanallah, he has blessed me with a child with a health condition. When she's hospitalized, I'm reminded. When she's crying in pain, I'm reminded. And I wonder, subhanallah, what my life would be like, or what my reality would be like if he didn't give me a child with this challenge. Would I be heedless? Would I be lost? Would I take him for granted? You know, even when she is well, subhanallah, do I forget what he is able to do and how he works for us in our lives? And that those moments when she's well and those times when she's well is actually Allah working to keep her, you know, to keep her well, subhanallah. And I in many ways, I'm grateful for that ongoing test, because a part of me feels that my Lord, knowing me, maybe he knows that if I didn't give her this, she'd be somewhere else. So his hikmah was to give me this child with this challenge and this blessing in order for me to have that reminder and that constant, Allah ya Rabbi, grant her shifa. Allah ya Rabbi, you know, help us through this challenge, you know?
I think I have to agree with you in that I think that yearning, it tastes different, you know, when you're kind of being tested. But we should not be a people that ask for tests in order to come to Allah. Not at all. We should ask for afiyah, you know, and well-being for sure. But I think unless we are making it our kind of priority project to worship Allah as much as we can in as many moments as possible, unless we make that our absolute priority, from his love, from his mercy, he's going to send you whatever he knows you need to wake up, to remember, to close the gap, to yearn for him from a place of need, in order to remember him, in order to throw yourself in worship, to hopefully then trigger off a different existence and a different connection, a different life. And we are, after all, insan. And insan comes from the root word to forget, right? So we will constantly be sent reminders specific to us. But I wonder what we can do outside of that so that we can close the gap without waiting for the test.
Yeah, and for me, one of the things that I ask him is, Ya Rabbi, do not put me in a place where I have become heedless before I remember you again. That is a scary thought, that we would need to remember, get to a place of heedlessness in order to remember him. And so even when things are good, I ask, Ya Rabbi, just maintain this for me in terms of my desire for you. Don't make me heedless of you.
Do you know why?
That's so scary.
Imagine, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us all from this. I mean, but imagine being taken in that state. And we don't know. We don't know when, right? So that's a very powerful dua, because we don't want to be taken, you know, in that state of heedlessness, in that state of just not placing him as a priority. It's a really, really scary thought. So are we saying then that kind of active dhikr is what can lead us to close that gap, but also maybe even like before that, just to come to Allah and to say, Ya Rabbi, I want to live my life for you in the full sense of it. I don't want it to just be private devotion. I want to live my life for you. And I want you to take that intention further. Help me, help me to remember you. I think sometimes we want things, even like states of iman, stations of iman, and we think that we have the tools to achieve that stage or that state
all on our own.
All on our own. And I use this example, and I've used this example a lot, that when it came to, in fact, I think I'm going to keep that for the next episode, for another episode. But essentially, what I'm saying is, sometimes we desire something, we want something, and we think that we can achieve it. But actually, were we to go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for it first, then He will bring us what He knows we need. And it's actually the quicker route. So if we really want to close that gap, let's ask Him for it.
That's it. I think also it's what brings you. So you guys talked about when you're tested, you're compelled to come out of desperation, basically. And Allah knows. And what starts as you wanting to your kid to heal, to feel better, to get to a better place, to get a material thing, to a relationship, whatever it is that you're, is heavy on your heart, and you're begging Allah for. And this is the thing that Allah uses to draw you in, because He knows it's what's dear to you. And He withholds the thing because He knows it'll keep you there. And He will give it to you when He decides it's the right time, and in His wisdom it's proper. But I think that as the person persists and they're begging Allah for whatever it is that they came for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala starts to change them. He starts to grow them through this interaction, and it doesn't become about the thing anymore. It's slowly, this person starts to develop into being a person who is connected to Allah for real. They came for the thing, but they're getting that connection, and they're getting this station that Allah is giving them, and they couldn't have got it, like you guys said, without the test. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises us in that way, through these things that happen in our lives, through trials, through difficulties, and that we turn into these people who are attached to Him, and it doesn't become about the thing anymore. In fact, by the end of it, you're kind of like, oh Allah, I trust you. Your plan is perfect. I know you're taking care of me. I know you will only expose me to just what's required in terms of pain or in terms of difficulty. And I know that where you're going to take me is going to be amazing. And you're just not hard pressed anymore. It's not about my plan and what I want and da-da-da. You just come into this, you step back, and you kind of have to surrender, because you've seen now, if I'm turning to Allah and asking Him, and He's choosing to give this and not that, why am I going to stress myself out trying to preempt the whole thing? I just trust Allah to give me what He's going to give me, and trust that it's going to work out.
So maybe that even applies then to asking Him for more presence in intention and remembrance of Him. How He responds to that specifically for you, it's like trusting in that too. And that may come through ease. It may come through a test. It may come through you having to put in a lot of work. And it may be, as you see with some people, that Allah just gives them something and they just change and they just become aware, and they're just living and breathing for His sake. But I think it's just trusting how He responds to that desire to come near Him, to live closely with Him through the everyday, because that's essentially what closing the gap between living and worship is all about, right? It's fulfilling my very purpose, the very reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us, and not making that secondary. I don't know if I'm making sense.
Something that I like to think about is having Allah as the destination, as the ultimate destination, and having Him at the core of the thing. So Him at the core is the intention, and Him at the ultimate destination is the action, why we're doing what we're doing. So if I'm cooking dinner, for instance, for my family, and I'm thinking, okay, Allah being at the core of this is that even down to the ingredients that I choose, the ihsan of that will shift, because I'm thinking of Allah in this, that I want it to be halal and tayyib. I want to make sure that it's good for them, that it's nourishing, nutritious, but ultimately I'm doing it for the pleasure of Allah at the end. That, Ya Rabbi, I'm doing this. This is a day to day, but with you in mind that I'm doing this action, you know. And it just takes it to another level where the mundane is no longer mundane. That energy towards the mundane shifts as well. So things that we once resented, the resentment drops because we know why we're doing it and for whom we're doing it. Oh, so you guys thought I was cooking for you. You know, there's a different contentment that comes when we do that. And I think there's a surrendering that comes with that, like surrendering from expectations, from thanks from people, from the little things, and just like, okay, this is for Allah anyway. So it's khair. And the outcome is khair. Whether you like it, whether you like me, doesn't matter, because this is for Allah. You know?
Definitely. So, if there was one piece of advice that you would give to everyone, including ourselves, in closing the gap between living and worship, what would that be?
Istighfar, as much as humanly possible, and the dua, Allahumma a'inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, assist me in mentioning you and worshipping you with ihsan.
What she said. I'm gonna come to you next time.
I was like, I wanted that.
Said, you know?
Yeah, subhanallah. Asking for Allah's aid in knowing Him and worshipping Him and filling our days with worship. Like that, just asking Him for the aid, but also the istighfar piece, knowing that we could never. We will always fall short. There will always be a deficiency, but we seek His mercy and we ask Him to cover us in His mercy and forgiveness for the ways that we will be deficient, because we could never worship Him and praise Him and thank Him and remember Him as He is deserving to be.
I think I agree with both of what you've said, and I think the only thing that I would add is to remember death, because in the remembrance of death, you remember your purpose in life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala fill our hearts with a yearning to be close to Him and grant us the tawfiq and the ability to intend beautifully, even when with the most simplest, mundane things that we do in this dunya. Ameen ya Rab. Thank you for joining us for this episode, and we look forward to speaking with you again, seeing you again at the next episode of Honesty Talk, inshallah. We have celebrated each other.
You're like, please God, you know, I'm not in a great place. Like, don't let me die like this.
We have supported one another.
The lesson in dua, but also how Allah arranges our affairs.
Beautifully and perfect. We've heard each other. We've seen each other. Dua is that.
Trusting in Him and the results, it relieves your anxiety and your stress, and you just become like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of my absolute favorite topics, and that is dua.